good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice for radio. And today, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to look at another one of these funky Japanese decks. My lovely friend over on Twitter, Code64, has been sending me deck lists of Japanese decks, which have been winning League Cups over there, or their equivalent thereof. And it's time to look, and stop me if you've heard this one before, at a Naganadel deck. Ladies and gentlemen, Naganadel is pretty much getting to the stage right now of a little bit ridiculously over the top good. And once again, there's a Japanese player that's found a different way to play it and take advantage of it and make it amazing. We've looked at Naganadel recently. I mean, look, we've obviously looked at stuff like Blacephalon, which is kind of the obvious, or at least one of the obvious uses, which is becoming possibly the best deck in Japan right now. I will link all these decks in the description, obviously. But we had a look at it with Turtonator. We had a look at it with Tapu Koko GX. And now it's time to have a look at it with Suicune. That's right, when Suicune was revealed, I basically said, hang on a second. Suicune is finally getting a GX, and it's not very good. And I was so sad. Well, actually, it turns out with Naganadel and a couple other choice cards, which are very important, Suicune becomes really, really good. Now, first of all, Naganadel, and look, we've talked about this a bunch, so we're really not going to go into a huge amount of detail here. But, nice and simply, the ability says that once during your turn, you may attach a basic energy of any description from your discard pile to Naganadel. Now, the attack does 80 damage for free energy, 160 if you've got exactly 3 prizes remaining. But as we've seen with all of these decks, either you want a Pokemon like Blacephalon, who can do a huge amount of damage depending on how much energy is on the field, or you want a Pokemon like Tapu Koko that can move the energy over to you. Well, this isn't Tapu Koko, but we do have the Quagsire here from Dragon Majesty. We looked at this in a Lapras deck recently, played by the lovely Joe Bernard. And it's a little bit broken here. Because Lapras' ability Washout says, as often as you like during your turn before you attack, you may move a water energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. So basically, Naganadel's ability might say you can attach energy from the discard to Naganadel, but because of Quagsire, you can actually attach it anywhere you like as long as it's the active. You get the Pokemon you want in the active, and then it doesn't matter where the energy is, you can move it over. So you get the energy on Naganadel, it sits there on Naganadel, you get the Pokemon you want in the active, you move it up, life is good. But why Suicune? Because on the face of it, free energy, 120 damage, during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon's attacks do 30 less damage. I mean, it's fine, it's an okay attack, but there's nothing particularly exciting about this attack. It's a very vanilla one-hit KO if you're hitting for weakness, 2-hit KO if you're not. But it does reduce damage done to you by 30 the following turn, and then the ability comes in here. And the ability is kind of great in this context. Once during your turn, when this Pokemon is on your bench, you may shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. See where we're going with this? If your opponent doesn't get a one-hit KO on you, and bearing in mind what you'll often do is bring the Suicune active and hit with it, so when I say one-hit KO, they've got to get a one-hit KO, bearing in mind you're reducing damage done by 30. And if they don't get a one-hit KO, you retreat Suicune, discarding 2 energy. And honestly, at this stage, it would actually be better if you had a retreat cost of 3. But hey-ho. You discard 2 of the energy. You then shuffle Suicune back into your deck. You take the energy that you just discarded and accelerate it to your bench Naganadel. Then you get a new Suicune in the active. Hopefully you retreated one Suicune for the other. And you use Quagsire to move that energy to the bench. And essentially, if your opponent doesn't one-hit KO a Suicune, retreat, put new Suicune up, move energy over, shuffle Suicune into your deck, rinse, and repeat. And if your opponent isn't getting a one-hit KO on a Suicune, they're basically just not able to win the game. And one of the things that is nuts about this, yes, Alolan Muck will turn off Suicune's ability, but it won't turn off Quagsire or Naganadel. It's redonk. Now, the only other Pokemon we see here, there are a couple nice and simply. Obviously, we've got Tapu Lele here, just purely in terms of being able to search out your supporter cards. We've got a couple of Tapu Koko. Now, Tapu Koko is quite important as a free retreater here. But also, it just spreads a bunch of damage around. 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. It's alright. It's not the worst thing ever. And then Volcanion Prism Star, which is great. Volcanion Prism Star has a decent attack that does 100 to the active, 20 to all of your bench. Kind of like Tapu Koko, but much more to the active. But we've also got an ability here whereby you can discard a water energy from your hand and make your opponent switch their active. Making them switch their active is good, but remember, you need to discard the water energy so that you can then get it back using your Naganadel. So actually here it's crazy good. And we see one copy of Palkia GX, obviously the water one, not the dragon one. And I mean, look, there's a couple good things about this. The attack Hydro Pressure does 60 damage plus 20 more for each water energy attached to this Pokemon. Now, this is actually a very similar attack to Quagsire itself. Quagsire is 60 plus 20, Palkia is 60 plus 20. It's pretty gosh darn similar, except this has got a lot more beef. And what you can do here is essentially smash at the end of the game. This is your end of the game, move all the energy over and take one last big giant KO. But don't sleep on the GX attack here. Honestly, Suicune's GX attack 150 switch to the bench. I mean, look, maybe it's not really that good. Whereas your GX attack on Palkia here could really, really come in handy. What it does is it does 150 damage, but it makes your opponent take all of the energy attached to all of their Pokemon and shuffle it into their deck. So it's a nice little late game sweeper, though Quagsire will do the same, while also getting rid of your opponent's energy. Speaking of energy, you play a bunch of water and you play a couple double colourless. The double colourless can work for stuff like Palkia here, but it's mostly good for Tapu Koko. Now, in terms of the trainer line here, there's a lot that we would expect. But there's a little bit that, frankly, we wouldn't. One of my favourite cards in this deck is Beastring. Beastring, if your opponent has exactly 3 or 4 prizes remaining, lets you search your deck for 2 basic energy and attach them to one of your Ultra Beasts. And then Quagsire moves it to your active. This is great energy acceleration. You won't always need it, but it's nice to get more energy on the field, because the more energy you can stash on the field, the less reliant you are on Naganadel and the ability. I adore this. Obviously, we're also playing some Aqua Patch here to accelerate energy from the discard. You never know if you're going to have some janky games, and the thing to remember, Beastring can also be used on Poipole, so if you're struggling to get Naganadel, that can help. We see Brooklet Hill here, which gets your water Pokemon, and we see Ultra Space that gets your Ultra Beasts. So this is actually kind of cool in that the vast majority of your Pokemon, anything other than Tapu Koko and Tapu Lele, the Alolan Guardians, can be grabbed with Stadiums. And then after that, it's pretty much as we might expect. We see a mixture of Ultra Ball and Nest Ball as Pokemon search, because that's what Japanese players tend to be playing. I've made the point a few times, basically Bridget has been replaced by Nest Ball. At least in Japan. We've got Rescue Stretcher to recover your Pokemon. We've got Field Blower to remove your opponent's tools and stadiums. Especially good for something like Shrine of Punishment here, which is going to punish you, because you're using a GX as your main attacker. We've got Choice Band, so you do a bit of extra damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. We see Switch to get yourself out of the active. Cynthia, because it is the best shuffle draw we've got at the moment. It is the best draw supporter. 4 of those. Guzma to drag your opponent's Pokemon off the bench to try and KO them, or maybe stall. We see Lily, which is, again, it's a good draw supporter. Draw till 6 cards in hand, or 8 if it's your first turn of the game, which is seeing an awful lot of play in Japan. And then a couple of weird cards to finish off. TV Reporter, which is seeing play in a huge amount of decks at the moment. Draw 3 cards, then discard a card from your hand. Both Aqua Patch and Naganadel need the energy in the discard to accelerate it, but you might not have the energy in hand. The great thing about TV Reporter is you draw the cards, then discard, which is really handy if you don't have it in hand right now. And 1 copy of Underground Expedition. I know, right? Underground Expedition. Look at the 4 cards from the bottom of your deck. Choose any 2 cards you find and put them in your hand. Put the remaining cards back on the bottom of your deck in any order. This seems very much like a personal choice here, because unless I'm missing something obvious, and if I am, please do let me know in the comments section, there's no cards we're playing that put stuff on the bottom of your deck, but it gets 2 out of 4, so I don't know. Maybe. Slightly less convinced on that one. This is a weird deck. I did not buy Suicune. I did not think Suicune was good. I was not excited by it. And it's good. It's not good. But when you combine it with Naganadel and Quagsire, and you can then basically always just get rid of it and then roll with a new one, if your opponent doesn't get a one-hit KO, meaning you essentially auto-win any matchup that can't one-hit KO you, yeah, that's starting to sound quite a bit better at this point. So there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to know what you think about this, so you got to go and let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! But do please remember my rule. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, other than checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, wink, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.